23 years after the release of the 1997 original, fans are finally getting their hands on the much anticipated Final Fantasy VII Remake. There's a lot of hype surrounding this game, and for good reason. Not only is the original considered one of the finest games ever made, the remake isn't just a remake. Actually, it isn't a remake at all. This is a complete reimagining of the original game. Every plot point, every story arc, every town, every scene, every character. It's all being significantly fleshed out to give more depth and context to the original story. However, Square Enix has also opted to expand the story with new plot points, story arcs, and characters. As a result, it's just too much work and too much content for one game, so it's being split up into multiple, full-length games. Rather than creating a one-to-one remake, they've made the decision to take what is largely considered a masterpiece and entirely recreate and rework it into its own series. I have never seen an instance where something like this has actually worked out. However, from what I've seen of the game and after playing the demo, I believe that Square Enix is on the path to success here. With one important caveat, but we'll get to that later. And by the way, my thoughts are based on my experience with the demo. Obviously, this isn't the full game and things could change. Anyway, let's talk about what they've done right. It's clear that a lot of time and care went into this project, which isn't surprising considering what game we're talking about. I played the demo on a launch model PS4, and the visuals blew me away. The footage you're seeing was recorded using the PS4's built-in capture function, so it doesn't quite do justice to what I was seeing on screen. The character models are extremely well done. You can see every little detail in the textures of their clothing, you can make out individual strands of hair, and their skin has an almost photoreal quality to it. The environmental lighting, the texture work, and the audio design come together to create a sense of atmosphere. And the music, it's phenomenal. I can't wait to hear the rest of the soundtrack when the full game comes out. I was also really surprised by the UI and menus. They appear to be pretty easy to use and understand based on the demo, and they're certainly visually appealing. I know that most people might not think that's a big deal, but I've played some RPGs with really cluttered and hard to understand UIs. An intelligent UI is pretty important for me, so I'm glad they didn't screw it up here. All in all, it's clear that they took the overall presentation seriously. It's got a high budget film quality to it, and I love that. For the most part, the story remains largely the same, but there are a few diversions from the original game, each of which could have some interesting effects in the full game. For one, Cloud seems to have these episodes where he freezes, almost like he's somewhere else in that moment. This is likely a visual representation of Cloud's memory issues from the original. However, they seem to be showing up much sooner than I remember. I wonder how that's going to play out and affect other key scenes. Then there's the explosion. There's a significant change here. In the original scene, the bomb goes off and Jessie wonders why the explosion was far more severe than she had planned, but that plot point never really went anywhere. But in the remake, you see that their bomb didn't do much physical damage. It just disabled the reactor. But we see President Shinra give the order to destroy the reactor and frame Avalanche for the disaster. Now, this doesn't exactly absolve Cloud and the gang of any wrongdoing, but that's a pretty big diversion. I wonder how far that will be taken in the final game. Lastly, there's a secret ending in this demo. I won't spoil it. If you haven't seen it, make sure you choose the 20-minute timer when you set the bomb. There's a very significant hidden scene at the end. Again, I won't spoil what it is, but it raises the possibility of a major plot point of the original either being introduced earlier or possibly even changed. I'm very curious how they're going to handle that in the full game. Remember when I said there was one important caveat? Yeah, unfortunately it's regarding the combat. The combat system has been completely redesigned. Gone are the turn-based battles, having been replaced by real-time action. In keeping with all other aspects of the game, the combat is intended to provide a highly cinematic, almost film-like presentation. I see what they're trying to do here. It seems the goal is to take something like the Final Fantasy VII film, Advent Children, and adapt that style into an interactive experience. And that's a good idea, in theory. However, it just doesn't work here. But not because it can't be done. The problem is how the combat system actually works. In order to use abilities, spells, and items, you need to build up your ATB gauge first, or active time battle. To do that, you'll need to perform regular attacks by pressing or holding square. Pressing it will let you do a single attack, while holding will automatically attack and perform combos. But there's no benefit to manually attacking by pressing square. There's no mechanic here for timing your attacks or anything of that nature. Whether you press or hold square, the end result is the same, but holding is far more efficient. And that's the issue. You spend 90% of combat sitting back, watching your characters fight while you wait for your ATB to fill up so you can finally do something meaningful. Is it cinematic? Sure. But it just isn't any fun, especially since Cloud only has a handful of moves to string together for those combos. It's just boring. Combat in the original game was much more interesting because, in some capacity, it was strategic and methodical. Yes, you had to wait to perform your attacks. It was turn-based after all. But it never felt like the game was being played for you. Nor did it feel like the game was on easy mode. So how could this be fixed? Well, instead of attacks being tied to one button, why not add some depth? Let's say that square handles the basic but fast sword attacks. Circle could trigger area of effect style sword swings. Triangle could make Cloud perform a slower, heavier attack by swinging his sword up or slamming it down over the enemy's head. You get the idea, but this would allow the player to mix and match different moves on the fly to create dynamic combos. That would keep the player engaged and invested in the fight rather than just waiting to trigger main abilities. Would that be perfect? Hell no. But it would go a long way to injecting some fun into the experience. And when you're talking about a likely 50-hour game, keeping things fun and interesting for the player is incredibly important. There's no denying this game will be an incredible experience for the fans. I'm certainly excited, and now I understand what they're trying to do with this remake series. I get why it's taking so long, and I'm glad they've taken their time. Combat issues aside, if they can deliver on everything else, I'll be happy. And I'm surprisingly confident that they can. I'll find out for sure when Final Fantasy VII Remake launches on April 10th. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been your host, ThePorkChopper, and thank you for watching the first episode of What I Think.